Bad news today, bad news tomorrow. For 2 years, the intensity of world-changing events is increasing dramatically. For many, this is something new and can be stressful, to a point where we have to ask, how to cope with collapse. I share a bit of my personal story and how life is different when you are collapse aware. And in the end, I list some strategies to keep clarity and a somehow personal optimistic outlook for the future in all of this. Welcome to Dark New World. People are slowly waking up to the fact that the world is going downhill. 3 months after I joined the army, Russia annexed Crimea. Back then, it felt like something big would happen. Sanctions got imposed, but it cooled off on an international level fairly quickly. The feeling that the world was at the brink of a major world war was simply non-existent. It was a big event. A year later, I moved with my girlfriend to East Germany, because she was going to university there. In the first year, the refugee crisis happened. I saw extreme right-wing groups with torches in my street. I saw the massive crack in society that dominated the headlines every day. And I realized for a brief moment that something is wrong. But my mind went dormant again. Because at this stage you could see symptoms, but they happened and people found a solution. Life went on. I went to university. So everyone saw these crises as separated events. They weren't. My girlfriend had someday to change planes in Istanbul when she visited her family. The day was the 15th of July 2016. She sat in one of the last planes leaving the country before tanks were rolling in front of the airport. There was a coup attempt to overthrow President Erdogan. Again, an isolated event, right? And then, it was a late night in the beginning of January 2020 when I read about lockdowns and a rumor of a new disease. I can remember the feeling I had. In that moment, something in my life changed. I didn't sleep that night, because I knew my life would change soon. I still cannot describe the sense of clarity I had that night. A pandemic and the start of a war in Europe later, the big events I just talked about sound insignificant in comparison with the problems of today. Things happen more frequent, and these events are broader in their scope. The Minister for Economy in Germany explained that the gas reserves of Germany will probably hit zero this winter, that we have the biggest price hike since 1949. The Russians reduced the gas flow of Nord Stream 1 from Russia to Germany about 40%. What will happen when the Russians turn off the other 60? 2.5 years ago, people would have thought you crazy if you would tell them how the future looks. But somehow, people got used to it. 2008 was another event. It shaped the economic situation we have right now, to some degree. But again, it was an isolated event happening in the grand scheme of things, not observable by most people. I'm going to ask you a question now. Do you thought back in 2012 that the world in 5 years from back then would be better or worse? What would you have thought? And then in 2017, ask yourself the same question. I thought it's going to be worse back then, but I had way less examples to prove my point. Today, it's different. Now, do you think the world in 5 years will be better or worse than today? Ask yourself. Ask family and friends. If someone answers with better, then ask why. Do the same if they say the world is going to be worse. I did exactly that. And while most people would have said the world would be a better place in 2012, today most people would say it's going to be worse. In the end, it's easier to live in a world with an optimistic outlook. In a working world, a healthy environment and optimistic people around you can be uplifting and boost your own morale, productivity and spirits. For the past 2 years, problem after problem arises and we have to narrow down our field of view if we try to ignore it. And there are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who will ignore everything as long as they can to be happy, and those who see it and have that uncertainty and fear inside them. But there is another way, at least in my personal opinion. Instead of focusing on the world and things you have not under control, someone could instead focus on the immediate environment and surroundings. What do you have under control in your life? Do you live at a place that has a lot of problems? Is there the possibility to move? Who else is there that you can talk to about the current events? Because the single most toxic thing for the mind is not to talk with people. When we communicate, especially about loss or collapse, we can make more sense out of this world, and our soul and spirit is getting less stressed. But people can more than listen. As a next step, is there something you and the other people you can trust can do to prepare? Instead of only having a thought in your head, you could turn those thoughts into action. And it doesn't matter how unimportant it may seem, it has more than one good effect for you and your well-being. For me personally, it was prepping. Living in an urban environment is not a good starting position to prepare. Everything more than a small pantry and a bug-out bag is simply not achievable in a small apartment alone. But it's a start. Having the supplies there is actually helping me to sleep. Having thought out a plan, in the case of emergency, is calming my mind late at night. In case something happens, it's not a guarantee to get out alive. But that's not entirely the point. The point is, and that's what matters with Collapse as well, is to stick around and do your personal best. You do whatever you can and try to be the best version of yourself. The outcome is uncertain. It always will be. It doesn't matter if the situation looks good or bad. But to live a life with dignity until the end, independent of the situation around you, and focused on your own beliefs sounds for me very honorable. Back in World War II, people thought this will be the end of the world. We tend to look into the past and think what people thought. But we have that position of clarity. Back then, everything was terrifying. Each new event felt like the end of the world was there. But it only was the end of their old world, and the birth of ours. Now it's our turn, and we have to live through uncertainty. But the world as a whole is not ending. Nothing ever does. It's changing, developing into something new. And as long as we can take the right action, make ourselves clear that change is inevitable and can be a good thing in the long run, then the situation looks completely different than just a future is bad mindset. Define for yourself what will happen, what could happen. Answer yourself the question, do you really believe the world will end? Think about the world that will come after. There will be something new. Our world is an experiment, with good and bad achievements. But we are making our first baby steps as a species. Whatever happens, the systems in place in 500 years will probably be better than the systems today. Look back and study our history. But many will say now, hey, I don't care about humanity. I just want to live in peace and have a good life. Well, yes, I can understand that. But why it's maybe harder to achieve today than it was yesterday? A comfortable life is, in my opinion, still achievable. For example, not every person saw combat and suffered in World War II. We look at the people who saw the worst in this period. But you could have a normal life, even in Europe, depending on the place. In fact, half the world is suffering from malnutrition, conflict and disease. And you had no idea about it happening. Take action, position yourself as good as you can, and sometimes, maybe step back from media. Don't doom scroll so much, and turn off the TV a little bit earlier. Do something for you, recharge, and then go back into the world. You are living through one of the most interesting times in human history. You are part of this world, one story, that needs to be told when we are all through this. And how bad it will get, don't forget that collapses change. A change can lead to a better future. There are good reasons why our system doesn't work anymore. And it's actually long overdue. This planet needs collapse, otherwise our biosphere would die. And we should do everything we can to make it as controlled and stable as possible. But enough from me. I want to hear all of your stories. How does the world around you look today? How do you see collapse happening? How do you cope with it? Let me know it in the comments below. If you want to find out how the next 3 years could look like, then watch this video. On the right, we have a video about the collapse of the West, the problems we face in the US, Europe and Australia. My name is Dennis, thank you for watching and goodbye.